Wings of Fire by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. Creation, Part 1. I started my work at NASA at the Langley Research Center, LRC, in Hampton, Virginia. This is primarily an R&D center for advanced aerospace technology. One of my most vivid memories of LRC is of a piece of sculpture depicting a charioteer driving two horses, one representing scientific research and the other technological development, metaphorically encapsulating the interconnection between research and development. From LRC, I went to the Goddard Space Flight Center, GSFC, at Greenbelt, Maryland. This center develops and manages most of NASA's Earth-orbiting science and applications satellites. It operates NASA's tracking networks for all space missions. Towards the end of my visit, I went to the Wallops Flight Facility at Wallops Island in East Coast, Virginia. This place was the base for NASA's sounding rocket program. Here, I saw a painting prominently displayed in the reception lobby. It depicted a battle scene with a few rockets flying in the background. A painting with this theme should be the most commonplace thing at a flight facility. But the painting caught my eye because the soldiers on the side launching the rockets were not white, but dark-skinned, with the racial features of people found in South Asia. One day my curiosity got the better of me, drawing me towards the painting. It turned out to be Tipu Sultan's army fighting the British. The painting depicted a fact forgotten in Tipu's own country, but commemorated here on the other side of the planet. I was happy to see an Indian glorified by NASA as a hero of warfare rocketry. My impression of the American people can be summarized by a quotation from Benjamin Franklin: "Those things that hurt instruct." I realize that people in this part of the world meet their problems head on. They attempt to get out of them rather than suffer them. My mother had once narrated an incident from the Holy Book. After God created man, he asked the angels to prostrate themselves before Adam. Everybody prostrated themselves except Iblis or Satan, who refused. "Why did you not prostrate yourself?" Allah asked. "You created me of fire and him of clay. Does not that make me nobler than Adam?" Satan contended. God said, "Be gone from paradise. This is no place for your contemptuous pride." Satan obeyed, but not before cursing Adam with the same fate. Soon Adam followed suit by becoming a transgressor after eating the forbidden fruit. Allah said, "Go hence, and may your descendants live a life of doubt and mistrust." What makes life in Indian organizations difficult is the widespread prevalence of this very contemptuous pride. It stops us from listening to our juniors, subordinates, and people down the line. You cannot expect a person to deliver results if you humiliate him, nor can you expect him to be creative if you abuse him or despise him. The line between firmness and harshness, between strong leadership and bullying, between discipline and vindictiveness is very fine, but it has to be drawn. Unfortunately, the only line prominently drawn in our country today is between the heroes and the zeros. On one side are a few hundred heroes keeping 950 million people down on the other side. This situation has to be changed. As the process of confronting and solving problems often requires hard work and is painful, we have endless procrastination. Actually, problems can be the cutting edge that actually distinguish between success and failure. They draw out innate courage and wisdom. As soon as I returned from NASA, India's first rocket launch took place on 21st November 1963. It was a sounding rocket called Nike Apache made at NASA. The rocket was assembled in the church building I have referred to earlier. The only equipment available to transport the rocket was a truck and a manually operated hydraulic crane. The assembled rocket was to be shifted from the church building to the launch pad by truck. When the rocket was lifted by the crane and was about to be placed on the launcher, it started tilting, indicating a leak in the hydraulic system of the crane. As we were fast approaching the launch time, 6 p.m., any repairs to the crane had to be ruled out. Fortunately, the leak was not large and we managed to lift the rocket manually using our collective muscle power and finally placing it on the launcher. In the maiden Nike Apache launch, I was in charge of rocket integration and safety. Two of my colleagues who played a very active and crucial role in this launch were D. Ishwar Das and R. Aravamudan. Ishwar Das undertook the rocket assembly and arranged the launch. Aravamudan, whom we called Dan, was in charge of radar, telemetry and ground support. The launch was smooth and problem-free. We obtained excellent flight data and returned with a sense of pride and accomplishment. When we were relaxing the next evening at the dinner table, we received the news of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. We were appalled. The Kennedy years were a significant era in America when young men were at the helm of affairs. I used to read with interest about Kennedy's moves in the missile crisis of late 1962. The Soviet Union built missile sites in Cuba from which it would have been possible to launch attacks on American cities. Kennedy imposed a blockade or quarantine barring the introduction of any offensive missiles to Cuba. America also threatened to respond to any Soviet nuclear attack from Cuba on any country in the Western Hemisphere by retaliating against the USSR. After 14 days of intense drama, the crisis was resolved by the Soviet Premier Khrushchev ordering that the Cuban bases be dismantled and the missiles returned to Russia. The next day, Professor Sarabhai had a detailed discussion with us on future plans. He was creating a new frontier in the field of science and technology in India. A new generation scientists and engineers in their 30s and early 40s was being charged with an unprecedented dynamism. Our biggest qualifications at INCOSPER were not our degrees and training, but Professor Sarabhai's faith in our capabilities. After the successful launch of Nike Apache, he chose to share with us his dream of an Indian satellite launch vehicle. Professor Sarabhai's optimism was highly contagious. The very news of his coming to Tumba would electrify people, and all laboratories, workshops and design offices would hum with unceasing activity. People would work virtually round the clock because of their enthusiasm to show Professor Sarabhai something new, something that had not been done before in our country, be it a new design or a new method of fabrication or even an out-of-the-way administrative procedure. Professor Sarabhai would often assign multiple tasks to a single person or a group. Though some of those tasks would appear totally unrelated in the beginning, they would at a later stage emerge as deeply interconnected. When Professor Sarabhai was talking to us about the satellite launch vehicle SLV, he asked me almost in the same breath to take up studies on a rocket-assisted takeoff system or RATO for military aircraft. The two things had no apparent connection except in the mind of this great visionary. I knew that all I had to do was to remain alert and focused on my purpose, and sooner or later an opportunity to do a challenging job would enter my laboratory. Professor Sarabhai was ever willing to try out novel approaches and liked to draw in young people. He had the wisdom and judgment which enabled him to realize not only if something was well done, but also when it was time to stop. In my opinion, he was an ideal experimenter and innovator. When there were alternative courses of action before us whose outcome was difficult to predict or to reconcile varying perspectives, Professor Sarabhai would resort to experimentation to resolve the issue. This was precisely the situation at Incospur in 1963. A bunch of young, inexperienced, but nevertheless energetic and enthusiastic persons were given the task of fleshing out the spirit of self-reliance in the field of science and technology in general and of space research in particular. It was a great example of leadership by trust.